our 412 youth. We are glad to have you back with us this week. So last week we talked about David and his life and his walk in integrity. And so we're going to talk about him a little more this week. And David was very much considered a great king, but he wasn't perfect, as we talked about last week too. What sets him apart, though, is his heart for God. Even when he messed up, he wanted to make it right because he loved God and he didn't want to sin against God. So that's kind of what we're talking about. We had been talking about last month. We're just going to finish it up this week. Is the integrity, living a life of integrity. So that goes along with our jump off scripture for our youth group, which is 1 Timothy 4:12. And it says, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct," which means living a life or having a lifestyle of integrity, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. So that means that you're an example to the believers. You're not just an example to everybody out in the world. You're an example to other believers who are in the church. So we want to live our life as an example, somebody that others can look up to, that they can pattern their life after. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we're continually learning about, is how that we can do that. And a lot of times, there are a lot of examples in the Bible. That's why we have the Bible, is for examples for us to be able to do that, to live that kind of life that represents God, represents Christ, and shows others what they can do also. And so this week we're going to read in 2 Samuel chapter 11. That's where we're going to start out. And I'm going to read out of the NLT. So this is the story of David and Bathsheba. And it says, starting at verse 1, chapter 11, it says, "In the spring of the year, when the kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem, so he stayed back in the capital city, while his general Joab and his army went out to fight the battle. Late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. He sent someone to find out who she was, and was told she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So David saw her and sent messengers to bring her to him at the palace, even though he knew that she was already married. And not only was she married, but she was married to Uriah, and Uriah was part of his army that was all fighting for David. So Bathsheba came to visit. She was called for to the palace, so she came, and as she visited David, and she stayed with him. And later she found out she was pregnant and sent a message to tell David that it was his baby she was pregnant with. So David, at this point, he starts to get a little scared. Remember that we've talked about before how fear makes you do things that often it never helps. It always will make the situation worse, because that's what the enemy is trying to do in the first place, is he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So first off, if you make a mistake, he's going to try and then make you make it worse. So that's when he's going to send fear. Fear in this situation of David, that somebody's going to find out that he had an affair with Bathsheba. So David wound up, he acted out of fear. He wound up sending a message to his general, Joab, out in the war and had him station Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, on the front lines of the battle so that he would be killed. That was his intention, is so that Uriah would be killed. He was going to try and cover this up. So we're going to start back in verse 22. It says, so the messenger went to Jerusalem and gave a complete report to David. So the messenger has, Joab has got the message from David, put Uriah on the front lines, I want him killed. Well, then that happens. And so Joab sends a messenger back to Jerusalem to tell David what happened. And it says, the enemy came out against us in open fields. And as we chased them back to the city gate, the archers on the wall shot arrows at us. Some of the king's men were killed, including Uriah the Hittite. Well, tell Joab not to be discouraged, David said. The sword devours this one today and that one tomorrow. Fight harder next time and conquer the city. So then David is like, well, don't beat yourself up about it. You know, that happens in war. Just do better next time. So he's trying to play it off like he didn't do this on purpose. But when Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. So he was her husband. She wasn't like, oh yeah, we need to have him killed. He was her husband. So she mourned for him. But when the period of mourning was over, so in Jewish cultures, usually they have a 7-day period when they do nothing really but mourn the person, the loved one that has passed away. So once those 7 days were over, David sent for her and brought her to the palace, and she became one of his wives. She gave birth to a son, but the Lord was displeased with what David had done. So obviously the Lord sees anything that we try to cover up. He already knows about. We can't hide anything from the Lord, from God. And so he obviously knew what happened. He knew that David was reacting out of fear. He was fearful that people would find out that he had an affair with Bathsheba and that she became pregnant. Fear that then people would find out that he had Uriah killed. So he married Bathsheba as soon as he could, so it would look like she got pregnant while she was married to David. But the Lord brings everything to light. So even though he's doing this, trying to do all this in secret, the Lord's going to bring it to light. So there was a prophet named Nathan in Jerusalem, and we're going to pick up at this is chapter 12 in 2 Samuel. And the first verse says, so the Lord sent Nathan the prophet to tell David this story. Nathan said, there were 2 men in a certain town. One was rich and one was poor. The rich man owned a great many sheep and cattle, and the poor man owned nothing but one lamb he had bought. He raised that little lamb, and it grew up with his children. It ate from the man's own plate and drank from his cup. He cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. And one day, a guest arrived at the home of the rich man. But instead of killing an animal from his own flock or herd, he took the poor man's lamb and killed it and prepared it for his guest. And when David heard this, he was furious. And he said, surely as the Lord lives, he vowed, any man who would do such a thing deserves to die. He must repay 4 lambs to the poor man for the one he stole and for having no pity. So this is what David said. David was absolutely disgusted that somebody would do something like that. But then Nathan said to David, you are that man. The Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anointed you king of Israel and saved you from the power of Saul. I gave you your master's house and his wives and the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And if that had not been enough, I would have given you much, much more. Why then have you despised the word of the Lord and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah the Hittite with the sword of the Ammonites and stolen his wife. So the Lord called him out. He called David out on his stuff. And he said, you get so mad about this parable. Jesus talked in parables and taught in parables a lot. This parable of this poor man losing his one beloved lamb to this rich man who had all he ever wanted. But that's exactly what you just did. Uriah had his one beautiful beloved wife, and you have all the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. I've saved you from Saul, who tried to kill you over and over again. I gave you his kingdoms. I gave you all that he had. But you want Uriah's one beloved thing, and you took it, and you killed him for it. You took it from him. And so it hit David hard. And so he confessed what he did and that he had sinned against the Lord. So he said, I have sinned against the Lord. Not, oh, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that against Uriah, which was true. But what it most hurt David's heart was realizing that he had sinned against God. And he knew he had messed up, and he messed up big time. And he confessed and he repented and he fasted. So sadly, a week after the baby was born, it passed away. But David continued to care for Bathsheba, and she soon gave birth to another son who was Solomon. And Solomon would then take over to be king of Israel after David, and he was considered to be one of the wisest kings Israel ever had. He was a great man of God. He built the temple for God. And so David, he knew he had messed up. He repented. He didn't then just like wash his hands of the whole situation and be like, oh, I messed up. I can't talk to you anymore. No, he continued to take care of Bathsheba because she was beloved of Uriah. He made her beloved of him too. So he continued to take care of her, even though their relationship began was wrong. He did right. So what I would like to ask is, have you ever made a mistake and then tried to cover it up? I know that I have in the past. Probably most of us have, even if not something as big as murdering someone like David did, but even something small like you told a lie, so then you try and cover that up. You have to then tell another lie, and then to cover that up you have to tell another lie, and then another lie, and then another lie, and the issue just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse, because the enemy is there telling you, oh, you can't get out of this, you've got to do this, you've got to hide this one, and you've got to hide that, and you've got to hide that. But that's acting out of fear. That the enemy is going to try and put fear on you that you're going to get in trouble, or you're never going to be trusted again, or you're never going to get this or whatever. And that's not true. If we keep doing that, we're just letting our flesh control our actions. But once you just stop and you take responsibility for whatever mistake you made, you ask for forgiveness, you repent, and you're not then continually trying to bury it, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. You can just put it behind you. You can take responsibility for it, and then you just keep going forward like David did. And so That's what we want to focus on. That is part. Living a life of integrity is not only just doing the right thing all the time. It's, if you mess up, you take responsibility for it, you put it behind you, and you just keep doing the next right thing. You just keep going forward. So that's what we really want to emphasize to you guys, to live a lifestyle of that. To just don't let one mistake knock you off the road. You just keep going, keep moving forward, just keep going and going and going. And the more you do that, the more it becomes a habit to do that. The more it becomes your lifestyle. You start to live a life of integrity. So we thank you so very much for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye, guys.